Hello, and welcome to the Tavern Chat podcast. I'm your host, Eric Tenkar, a bartender in the OSR, your main proprietor at the Tenkar's Tavern blog, Discord server, media group, Facebook group, Twittering, and Instagram, and youtube.com/Eric Tenkar for the live talking crit pretty much every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern with myself and Bad Mike from North Texas RPG Con, one of the part owners of Frog God Games. We have a great time doing it. And as I'm talking about that, I put this up on the blog side, but I'm going to mention it here. We are open to topic suggestions. When we were doing this once or twice a month, we were fine with knowing that Wizards of the Coast would politely fuck something up during that time period. And we'd have nearly an episode worth of talking about Wizards of the Coast. We're going to do this weekly. At least that's the game plan, and we can't rely upon Wizards of the Coast to fuck up on a weekly basis. As funny and as entertaining as it can be, I just don't see that. So, we need your assistance. You can call the show, 347-507-5168. I'm going to say that's the number for now. Or, if you're using the app, you can leave it via the app. Either way works, and we always like to hear from you. Now, if you listen live during the podcast, you can do that via Facebook or YouTube. If you are friends with me on Facebook, you'll get the notification. If you are subscribed to the YouTube channel, that's probably the best way. And the reason why I say that's the best way, I know some of you are like, I don't want to join something new. And I understand that. But the reason why I say it's the best way, Facebook kind of obscures who's commenting a lot of times. Or we had somebody who made like a good dozen comments that we would have read during the show and responded to. We didn't see it till after we recorded with so much comments on the Facebook share. YouTube stuff goes right through, and we know who's saying it. So youtube.com/Eric Tenkar, ERIKTENKAR. And just to make sure I got the phone number right, the phone number is 347-509-5168. So today, or actually tonight, I had something planned, and then I went onto the Discord server for Tenkar's Tavern, and I saw there was a discussion about Thieves, and got my mind going, because here's their question. And I'm going to go even beyond it. The person in question was like, why is it that in the TSR editions of D&D and AD&D, you could only attempt to pick a lock once? Well, basically, if you failed to pick a lock, you were screwed until you got your next level. And they wanted to know why that was. And there were some good answers. And the general consensus was, is that it was assumed that you needed more experience to suddenly grasp it. But it was also argued that you could allow further attempts, because picking a lock in a dungeon in that setting is at least 10 minutes. And that would require a wandering monster check, right? It's not like you're practicing picking locks in your abode or your hotel room. And that's all fine and dandy. I would go for that, but I would say the second attempt takes 3 turns. And a third attempt takes 6 more turns. So that's 3 random encounter checks, and then 6. I think that it's too short a time period to allow further checks without a real penalty. But here's my issue when it comes to Thieves in AD&D. They start out real incompetent, right? And by the time they become competent in their skills, they're pretty much, I hate to say it, but a useless class. They're, magic users are weak except for that casting of sleep at those early levels. But once they get Fireball or Lightning Bolt, they're bringers of death from above. Clerics are the healing machines, and they can fight decently. Fighters are fighting classes are your tanks, right? And they deal great damage and they absorb a lot of damage. But thieves are those utility infielders, and they don't survive well on the front lines. They don't deal a lot of damage unless they're backstabbing, and the thieving abilities are borked at low levels. So what I used to play with was that, you know what, those thieving skills are based on the average lock, right? And you have better locks and you have poorer locks. And when it came to poorer locks, you had poor and very poor. And for better locks, you had good and very good. And when it came to poor locks, depending on how tough I was making the campaign, but generally a poor lock would add plus 20 to the thieves' ability, and a very poor lock would add plus 40. So if you're starting with a 20 or 25% chance to open up a lock, and you have a very poor lock, and a very poor lock is that the stereotypical lock you see in movies or cartoons, where it's just like a skeleton key chunk, right? Something like that. It's almost like uh, picking a pair of modern handcuffs. You give somebody, who has a little knowledge on how to do it, the right improvised tool. I'm not going to tell you what it is. I've seen it done. You can pick it, right? And I would say that thieves are in that category. Now, a hard lock or a very hard lock affects everybody, because a hard lock with me cut your thief ability in half, and a very hard lock cut it by 3/4. So if suddenly, like, oh, I've got a 80% chance to pick locks, well, you know what? This is a hard lock, and that they weren't common. You might come across one hard lock every 2 or 3 adventures, but now your chance is halved, right? And what about those very hard locks? Because some of those abilities, right? You can get above 100. Why would you bother getting above 100? And think about it. When it came to picking pockets, it took into account, at least in AD&D, the level of your intended target. So if you were higher than your intended target, you had a better chance. If you were a lower level than your intended target, your chance went down. And that's why I like to play with poor and hard locks. Majority of locks in a dungeon are probably going to be average, right? But you can allow a thief to have a chance to succeed if the dungeon that's being run by goblins and kobolds, and maybe heck, they dug it out or they've renovated it and they've created their own locks. These aren't going to be tough locks to pick. But if they were like the dwarven dungeon with the original dwarven locks, they'd be a lot harder. And that's where it comes into play. I think there's things that you can do to make thieves a bit more variable, right? Like, why should a lock be a set percentage? Also, you could say some traps are easier to find, some traps are harder to find, right? Some traps are greatly concealed, and I don't know if I would. I probably wouldn't have the chance. I'd probably make it a straight up percentage penalty. This trap is hard to find. It's at negative 20%. This one's very hard to find, and it's negative 30%. Whatever fits your ability, your campaign. But this is an easy trap to find. Plus 20%. You can even make racial adjustments on the type of traps. Like dwarves are better at finding traps in a dungeon, whereas elves are better at finding traps outdoors. And you can give them a bonus beyond the racial bonuses. Or you can assume, in the case of a dwarf, that bonus goes towards dungeons. And you can give elves the same bonus, but it's toward outdoor traps only. There's ways you can play with it. What do they always say? Make the game yours, right? I mean, I've never played in D&D, AD&D, OSR game where each GM didn't bring their own house rules into it. And even in my case, depending on the campaign, I've brought different house rules in. It's just what we do. You tweak that stuff to make it your own. All right, folks. On that note, we're in the midst of a pandemic, as always. What do I say? Use your common sense. If you need further advice beyond that, take a medical professional's advice. We have an election coming up next week in the U.S. Today is Thursday, October 29th. We're voting next Tuesday if you wait until Election Day. Many states you can vote early. Why not do so? Right? I don't care how you vote. Vote. Be heard. It's like, oh, well, I live in a blue state and I want to vote red, and it doesn't make a difference how I vote. It makes a difference, especially in the local elections. Well, I live in a red state and nobody cares about my vote because it's going to be blue. Again, your single vote, especially in local elections, carries much more weight than you can imagine. Vote. Folks, be safe, be well, God bless, roll those dice, and God willing, Rachel and I will be back tomorrow with some Gamers Health. All right, folks. Laters.